The first GCC that I went to, 1983 in Myrtle Beach, and the fellowship and really the brothers that really made me want to be more involved in Kappa Psi, and that really kind of was the spark that helped me to grow that burning fire to really be a really awesome, to be a good brother, to really do more than just be involved at the chapter level or the province level. So it really was that very first experience at GCC in 1983, and really the brothers of that GCC that really helped to grow that desire. Obviously Dr. Campbell knows me pretty well. I think Brother Reeser and I have worked on a lot of different projects over the years. And then some maybe brothers that aren't as well known nationally. Brother Lou DiOrio, who was very involved with the New York grad, New Jersey grad, but he and I go back 30 years from when we were in, I was I think a fifth-year pharmacy student, he was a fourth year, but we've known each other for many, many years. Brother Marquita Harden, who was, I think, the first female elected to the executive committee. She and I have known each other for many years and been friends for many, many years. And so she probably as well, she's involved in the, actually Brother DiOrio and Brother Harden are both on the foundation. So we've maintained our friendships and moved them from the fraternity side to the foundation side. So another brother, Mark Bernaducci, who was involved at Beta Epsilon and has been involved off and on nationally. Another brother that's known me for a lot of most of my adult life, I would say. To the foundation, as you know, we're always trying to help raise money for scholarships. We've done a couple different challenges in the last week. I want to thank the entire executive committee for stepping up to the challenge, and so we're excited to offer our first executive committee scholarship this year in the amount of $1,000 to one of the students. And the newest brainstorm that I came up with over the weekend is hopefully we can get all of the past Grand Regents to contribute. I think we're about halfway there now, so if we can get 5 more past Grand Regents to make a $100 contribution, we can maybe even start a past Grand Regents annual scholarship. So ideally, we can come up with those additional fundings. It's a wonderful honor to be able to lead the foundation, and I'm very fortunate. My brothers have selected me to do that, but it's I kind of feel like I'm always trying to get money from everybody, so they probably start running when they see me because I'm always trying to ask them for a donation. So, but we've given out, I think, almost $250,000 in scholarships now over the last 20 years. And so we hope to continue to grow our investments and our portfolio and our giving because it would be nice to give out, $5,000 scholarships. I think that would be awesome if we could do something like that every year. So that would be my goal. I don't know if I'll see it in my lifetime, but hopefully we can continue to get people to donate, and chapters and provinces and individual business owners who will come in and help to support the foundation so that we can help students because they're our future. The greatest accomplishment was obviously becoming Grand Regent is a tremendous accomplishment, and that probably first and foremost. But I think the 2 GCCs under my leadership, when we had it in the Cape, and then in Myrtle Beach when I was the outgoing Grand Regent. I think at the time when we went to Myrtle Beach, we had something like 440 attendees, and I think that was the first time that we cracked the 400 mark, and so that was the largest one. When we were in the Cape, I want to say we had about 360 or so, which was kind of close to the highest number, but not quite. Might have been off by maybe 10 or 20. But I think getting more students involved, getting more students to come to GCC, I think that was a great accomplishment, because there are a lot of people who are involved in a lot of chapters who don't always go to GCC. They would go to province, but not necessarily to GCC. And I think we had the largest turnout at the time of chapters that participated in the GCC actually physically in attendance over those two GCCs. So I'd like to think that that was probably my greatest accomplishment. Outside of the fraternity, again, probably my involvement in my Greek American organization. So I was fortunate to be elected president for them. It was, again, quite an honor to lead the Greek American community, not only nationally but internationally. Getting invited to events at the White House, meeting the president, meeting ambassadors, different countries. Had the chance, to travel the world, seeing in 2 years, 48 out of 50 states, 7 different countries. Go to Paris, to go to Berlin, meet the president of Cyprus, meet the prime minister and presidents of Greece, even going to Turkey to meet the president of Turkey. And I remember going up the steps of the presidential palace in Turkey in Ankara and thinking, gee, pharmacy school did not train me to be a diplomat for the United States, but I will do my best in this very honored opportunity to serve in that capacity. So that was some of the highlights. Meeting the Greeks kind of have their own pope, and so I get to meet with him in Istanbul, and so got to see a lot of things and do a lot of things that the normal person wouldn't get a chance to see. So very fortunate, very blessed to be able to do those things. So to go from Alaska to Hawaii to every state to Paris, Germany, and Istanbul, an amazing run. So it's my goal to visit as many chapters. Kappa has about 500 chapters. I had read in the history books that one of the presidents in the 30s visited 90 chapters. So my goal was to break the record. So the first year I visited 99, and the second year I visited 136. I'm very good at making travel plans, and we would do things. So we would fly into Kansas City and then visit with the Kansas City chapter, and then drive from there to Omaha for breakfast, and then drive from there to Sioux Falls for lunch, and then drive from there to Sioux City for dinner. And so we'd hit in one weekend we could hit 4 chapters. My wife was always with me, and I was very fortunate. She always came along, no matter what crazy harebrained idea, like driving through Alabama or driving through North Carolina or Northern California. We'd fly into one place, and then we'd get a car and we'd drive, from Seattle to Tacoma to Portland, or wherever the case may be, and we'd hit as many places as we could, and then we'd go on to the next stop. So I want to thank American Airlines for making me Chairman Preferred for those 2 years. I enjoyed the first class upgrades, so it was a lot of fun. There's so many, Paris, the Eiffel Tower was beautiful. Alaska and seeing the ice, the glaciers and the icebergs were just beautiful. I mean, Hawaii was breathtaking. So when I visited the chapter in Mobile, Alabama, they actually had a police escort for me when I came. So they actually had the police cars, you thought I was some president of the United States or something, taking me to my hotel in downtown Mobile, or riding on the float in Fifth Avenue for the Greek American Independence Day parade, so being on the float, waving to the cameras, TV interviews when I was in Greece. So
wow.
Yeah, it was quite the whirlwind, quite the experience, and very fortunate, very blessed that if it wasn't for Kappa Psi, kind of showing me what it's like to be a leader and teaching me about leadership and teaching me about how to run meetings and parliamentary procedure, probably none of those things would have happened. So, as I said, I've always had great bosses. When I was most recently as a consultant now, as long as I have my laptop and my phone and my clients can call me or email me, and I can kind of do the research and give them their responses back. There were many times where they'd be getting emails at 3 o'clock in the morning because I was in a time zone half a world away, or I'd be someplace and they'd be hearing things in the background and they'd be like, "Where are you?" And I'm like, "Oh, well, I'm in Florida," and they'd hear either music in the background or talking in the background, and so as long as they were able to get a hold of me, they were good. There's so many brothers along the way. Like I think Dr. Campbell said in his, probably I won't be able to mention all of them, but mention some of them. You know, Brother Mike DeWeese, who's been a great friend and a great brother and a great mentor. Mark Beneducci, who's been a great colleague. Mike Graubart. I mean, there are so many brothers. Literally, Marquita Hardin. So many people that that you spend so much time with. For a condensed period of time. So it might be 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, but those brothers were really instrumental to kind of producing the successes on the foundation or things we've done with the fraternity and all of those brothers. And I'm sure I'm, like Brother Campbell said, forgetting more than I'm mentioning. So, every convention you'd go to, you'd meet brothers from another province or another part of the country, and you had a chance to do some wonderful things. So that's probably one regret, that I probably didn't write those things down. I know when I was president of HEPA, I started actually a journal to track day to day who I would talk to, what we would talk to, what we would work on. And in retrospect, I probably should have did that over my Kappa Psi career as well, to just kind of keep those memories and names and events and things that transpired written down. So that might be one regret, that I didn't write them down. I kind of learned that later on, that in the HEPA, that I did that then, but I should have probably did it in Kappa Psi. So, but we did a lot of good things. I know Dewey wrote the history book, but I think my year as Grand Regent, we actually produced the first Agora that we had done in 20 years. So we contacted Harris Publishing and got them to do a reprint, because I don't think it had been done in 20 years, and so we actually were able to bring that back. Now we do a directory every 3 or 4 years, but at that time it had been 20 years since we had done one. So, but I think I probably can't thank Bob McGarry enough, because every time I'd come up with, hey, we haven't done an Agora, let's do one, and it was how are you gonna do it? Well, I heard this company called Harris Publishing will do it for you, and so. And then he'd investigate it, and oh yeah, we can do it, and they'll publish all the names, and so. Yeah, I mean, I think, obviously the friendships I've made, the opportunity to grow as a leader, to learn from, different aspects of committee work and parliamentary procedure and all of those things. So, all of those have been helpful, not only in the profession of pharmacy, but also in work. So if, I go to a work meeting and then we need to have some type of a meeting with, minutes and parliamentary procedure, I've become the informal or the non-official parliamentarian on many occasions because of all of the things I've learned. So it's been a great opportunity to learn, to learn about different people, different parts of the United States, different cultures. It's just an amazing experience. That's one thing I would say, over the years, as we kind of get older and we're not obviously involved with the collegians, it's to any collegiate, feel free to come up and talk to us and not be intimidated. We're just like any brother in any chapter. We care about the fraternity, and we still want to see the fraternity grow and prosper. And so, feel free to anytime. I love it when the Beta Epsilon, people like Joe, they'll make the pledges, write me notes and emails and stuff like that, and so friend me on Facebook, don't be afraid, or reach out by email. I think that's what one of the wonderful things is about pharmacy is, meeting people and talking to people, and so by all means, don't be afraid. We're still brothers, so don't ever be afraid to come up and say hello, or ask a question, or just have a drink and talk about what it was like. So success was different probably, but I think one of the things is be persistent. When people tell you can't do it, try to figure out a way. Okay, well maybe I can't do it this way, but can we do it? Can we do something modified? Don't be afraid to compromise. Sometimes you might not get it 100% your way, but even 50% your way is still maybe getting some success as opposed to leaving it the same. So. So never take no for an answer, because there's always got to be a way you can figure something out. And don't be afraid to take chances. If you don't try something, you don't know if it'll succeed or if it'll fail. So, when we did a lot of things at GCC, I remember having the first volleyball tournament, or one year we had a softball tournament. We would just try different things to see how things would work out, and having a band, having music, having awards different. They were all things that it's you need to have a little trial and error, because sometimes you have to fall down and pick yourself up before you can succeed. Yeah, just be persistent. I remember, I was fortunate that the first GCC I went to, I ran for collegiate member at large and I won. The next GCC I went to, I ran for graduate member at large, and at that time, historian ritualist was a combined office, and so I ran for those two. Paul Hiller was my competition at graduate member at large, and Johnny Porter was my competition at historian ritualist. And I thought, well, gee, I won collegiate member at large, I'll just win again. But I didn't. It was one of those things where I could have easily said, well, gee, I lost and I'm not coming back. But I said, I'm just going to keep running and running and running until someday, they'll put me in because there's no one else left. So I think that persistence, that determination is that, don't be discouraged by your failures. It's, take those with a grain of salt, learn from what you did wrong and try to improve and try to do better so that when you do come back the next time and the next time, you can improve on your achievement. So those things, start to build your resume and start to build your own successes in your province or in your chapter, and then people see that you've been able to do so many wonderful things, whether it's develop a web page, whether it's raise money for the foundation, whatever it may be, run a raffle for the foundation at GCC. I remember Mike Starvaggi for many years would always be the person who ran our raffle, and then this year he was, elected as an executive committee member. So I'd like to think that all of his work kind of at the, foundation level and in the fraternity, those things get rewarded because people see that you're so willing to work and help, and those things help to make an image in somebody's mind that, hey, look, this guy really does want to roll up his sleeves and want to help the fraternity get better. And so, I remember Dave Maskowitz the same way. I mean, he did a lot of raffles for us over the years on the foundation, and, after 2 or 3 chances at not getting on the executive committee, he was elected as graduate member at large. So it's just keep plugging. I've always been in a very fortunate situation. When I was working as a hospital pharmacist, my director of pharmacy was a Kappa Psi brother who had gone to a GCC, whose GCD had run for national office and was an executive committee member. So he understood my passion and was able to kind of work with me to the best he could to accommodate the travel needs and the time off needs so that I could be involved as a national officer. So, when I left the hospital, again, I worked for an individual who had an understanding of professional organizations and membership and being involved. And so I've always had the good fortune to be working for somebody who always saw the involvement in professional organizations as a positive. The relationships that you build not only transcend just the fraternity, but also professionally. And there are opportunities that can grow from those relationships. And so every step of the way, I've been fortunate to be able to use some flexibility in my schedule to accommodate professional organizations. My wife is also very involved in her own organization, so she's very supportive as well, because she understands that kind of organization mentality of what it's like and what it is to give of yourself and give of your time and be away from home. And so, I've been blessed, to have parents who used to take me to the airport whenever I needed to go to a province meeting, or a wife that's willing to travel to me to a GCC. I think this will be my wife's 4th or 5th GCC. So, and actually my brother-in-law is coming this year, so he's actually going to be his 2nd GCC. So, you have family who just want to be part of the culture, be part of the festivities, and so hopefully, we can continue to grow in that way. So, I've been very blessed and fortunate. Like I said, the Kappa Psi leadership led to Pharmacy Association leadership led to, my Greek American organization leadership, and I think I've been fortunate along the way. Always willing to kind of take that chance, that office, that opportunity, and build on it. So I think I've been very fortunate through my whole professional career of having brothers and family and friends who've always been willing to help along the way. So wouldn't change anything. Yeah, I think the biggest challenges were at the time when I was Grand Regent. We had a couple of chapters that did things through the pledging period that were inconsistent with. It was actually probably even before we even had a pledge and hazing policy, but things that we had to investigate and then had to make some disciplinary actions against those chapters, unfortunately. And so I think that was the hardest part, is having to discipline people who are your friends and chapters that and that one unfortunate circumstance of a brother doing something or doing something to several brothers that is viewed as inappropriate nowadays, where you just can't do those things anymore. And unfortunately, having to discipline those chapters, I think it was 3 as I recall, but it was unfortunate to have to put those chapters under discipline, because you felt bad for the good brothers in the chapter, that 1 or 2 brothers who did something really hurt the entire chapter. But at the end of the day, when you have a university and a dean and alumni saying that they're disappointed in this behavior, we had no choice but to have to suspend or discipline those chapters. So that's probably the hardest part. It was really hard to say you're suspended. There were a lot of brothers. The two that really come to mind were Eben Welsh, who was part of the host chapter committee, and another brother that was his best friend, Mike DeWeese. And those 2 brothers from South Carolina grad, just so endearing and just so willing to, show me the ropes and take me under their wing, and, just wanted me to make that Kappa Psi experience the best that it could be. That was just, I would credit those 2 to really being the cornerstone to my growth in the fraternity. I just think I think it was just the fellowship. I mean, they just kind of took me in. They didn't know me. I was from Rhode Island and never saw me before, but they took me in as one of their own, and like I was a member of their chapter, and would always be there, and encouragement, and be there to motivate me throughout the week, and to keep my involvement going beyond that first GCC experience. And I think that's what made me start thinking about life in Kappa Psi beyond 1 week at a GCC. So I had gone to Province meeting that spring. That particular year, Province was held at New Chapter at the University of Connecticut. The satrap at the time, a brother from the Beta Delta chapter, again, was very motivational. I actually still see him to this day. He actually doesn't live too far from me, and actually after pharmacy school he went on to become a dentist. So he's still local, and we still talk about Kappa Psi, and he still has an interest, and never went on to the level that I went on, but I blame him for all of my extracurricular and advanced involvement in Kappa Psi, because if it wasn't for him, again, being part of that spark, I may not have grown to the heights that I have in the fraternity. His name is Theologos Malachias. So he goes by the name of Ted, and he's a member of our Providence graduate chapter. He grew up in New York, Long Island, went to Albany College Pharmacy, and but he's relocated to Connecticut now. So different levels, you kind of get involved when you pledge. And then, you go to your first Province meeting, and then you go to your GCCs. And I think, at every little level, you have somebody who's been part of that growth of your Kappa Psi brotherhood experience. At the chapter level, I would say, obviously, Dr. Campbell, who was the GCC and a mentor to so many of us at Beta Epsilon. The regent at the time was a brother by the name of Emilio Squillante. And he had just come back from a GCC, so he really was really motivated in trying to get a number of us who were underclassmen to get involved. And so I recall him as being part of that kind of initiative to get some of the younger pledges to get, or to get involved and to stay involved. I believe he's actually a faculty member now at St. John's University. So I don't know how involved he is with the chapter down there, but I know he's a faculty member down there. So that would be kind of at the chapter level. At the province level, I mentioned Ted Malahias. But also there were some U brothers who were involved back in the day. Gene Mendel being one that I recall. Baran Patel, another Mu brother. Tony DeMello. So Mu and Beta Epsilon always had a pretty good relationship. So we even Beta Delta had some brothers. John Farragon, now with the Albany Graduate Chapter, and so we always were kind of always running in the same circles, kind of always had the same vision for the fraternity, and so we were all always trying to see what we could do to make Kappa Psi better experience for everybody. And then at the national level, once you get to that level, so many people, you have Bob McGarrian, who was the executive director that I had tutelage under for so many, many years. Dewey Garner, who was the Grand Regent when I was initiated and met at one of my first APHA meetings at a Kappa Psi APHA reception. Then you have Brother Pat Wells and Ken Roberts, who I served under when I was on the executive committee of Kappa Psi, and then further along into my executive committee years, Brother Porter, Brother Paul Hiller, and so every step of the way you learn something. William R. Smith was another one that you take things that they've done. You hear the words of their wisdom, of their experiences in the fraternity, and so you take a little bit from everybody, and you develop your own personality from those best practices that you see in each of those brothers. So. From when we had one of the executive committee meetings, William R. Smith took us to Mackinac Island. So we're like, most of us had never even heard of Mackinac Island, Michigan. And then when you get there, you can't fly there. So you have to fly to this northern city in Michigan. And then you have to take a car service to the landing point, and you have to take a ferry boat over to the island, and then a horse-drawn buggy pulls up because there's no cars allowed on the island. So you think about all of the different things, and all the different GCCs. I mean, I've been to, I think this will be my 18th GCC, and so you stop and you think of the trip that we went to in Yellowstone when we stayed at Jackson Hole, the 2 times we've gone to Myrtle Beach, when we went to Marco Island for GCC, and every GCC has a story within a story. When we were in Yellowstone, we had a bunch of Beta Epsilon brothers, and we just kind of drove through the park and saw all the different sites, and went to see all of the different hot springs, and walked along all the different paths, and then you go to a place like Marco Island, where we're playing beach volleyball tournaments, and obviously Cape Cod GCC was probably very special because that's where I was elected Grand Regent, and it was quite an honor to be selected among all of the candidates and all of the brothers, by the brothers, to lead this fraternity. It's been just a wonderful experience, and it's really led me to, and I'm sure you'll have more questions, but it really has led me more to even beyond roles within Kappa Psi. It was Kappa Psi that I think helped me get involved in the State Pharmacist Association and become president of the Rhode Island Pharmacist Association, and then that helped to grow my leadership skills, and then from there to be like the international president of the Greek American organization called the HEPA, and so like one step leads to another, which leads to another, and Kappa Psi Foundation. So all of those kind of have helped to develop leadership skills, team working skills, and one has built on the other. So in Myrtle, well, no, not when I was Grand Regent, when I was actually Collegiate Member at Large. So at the time that was a whole story that we could probably spend about 10 minutes on. But when we went to Myrtle Beach for my first GCC, we had a number of brothers from Beta Epsilon go down. Some of them drove down in a van. And Beta Epsilon brothers are always very industrious, we'll say. And so one night when they decided to go to the liquor store and get some beverages for the suite that we had to have a celebration or to have just a party, instead of unloading the grocery cart, they just took the whole grocery cart. So there are pictures of somewhere in the archives of these brothers walking in the hotel lobby with a grocery cart full of beverages, and our grocery cart stayed in our suite until the day after elections or the night of elections, where they put me in the grocery cart and pushed me into the swimming pool. So that was a very memorable experience of me in the grocery cart going into the swimming pool at the Landmark Hotel in Myrtle Beach. So I don't remember. Actually, we did a lot when we hosted GCC at the Cape. We did a lot of things different. I was always one that wanted to kind of push the envelope and try different things. So Bob McGarian and I, he was very cooperative to allow me to do some different things. So when we hosted GCC in the Cape, one of the things we did was, at the time, the tradition had been once the banquet was over, the banquet was over. And I'm like, well, why don't we have music? Why don't we have dancing? Why don't we have some kind of a social function after? He's like, well, that's not what we do. And I was like, why not? I mean, we have brothers who are coming from all over the country. This is their last night. It's their last night to celebrate. We shouldn't just say, this is the last speech and everybody goes back to their room. So we actually had a band, which was really exciting. And they played music until I think 1 or 2 in the morning. And then, so that was the first time we actually did some social event after the banquet. So that was pretty cool. And then the next GCC, he actually let me try something else. So at that time, because the banquet was so long and we were getting done so late, I said, can we give out some of the awards as an awards luncheon? So that year in Myrtle Beach, the second Myrtle Beach convention when I was Grand Regent, we actually started the awards luncheon. So all of the Chapter of the Year awards, the EB award, the scholarship trays, all of those, we actually had a special luncheon for. So that was, because every time I'd come up with a wild idea, Dr. McGarian would look at me and he'd say, but we don't do it that way. And I'm like, but can we try it? And he would let me try it. And then we, if we had a great experience, we would continue. And to this day, we still have an awards luncheon. And so I'm thankful that the executive director allowed me to come up with these different ways to do things other than the tradition of what we had done in the past. So a lot of it too was for a long time it was trying to find a beach. I would say for maybe 4 or 5 year stretch, we went from one. We tried to go to places that were kind of would be a draw, and we always felt like the draw would be big because especially chapters from the Midwest, they don't get a chance to see the Atlantic Ocean or the Pacific Ocean. So it was, and I think everyone had a story. I remember the year we went to the San Diego convention in, I believe, 2003. I remember talking with, I think it was then Grand Vice Regent Craig Johnston, and I was like, Craig, he was actually from San Diego, and we had talked, and I'm like, why don't we go to San Diego? It's a great spot. The weather is beautiful. There's beaches, and he's like, oh, I never thought of that. And the next thing you know, they're looking at San Diego, and we end up having a GCC in San Diego. So there's probably stories the same, with going to Marco Island. I remember that year we had discussions about whether or not we should do GCC on a cruise ship. And so it was kind of cruise ship, and then we talked about, well, gee, if you miss the boat and you don't get there and you want to come late, how do you do that? And so I know Paul Hiller was very disappointed that we didn't get to go on the cruise ship. He was really interested in having it on the cruise ship. But we kind of decided that we'll go to the beach in Marco Island instead because, it's still a resort atmosphere. There's a lot to do. People from, the Great Plains and the Southwest can still enjoy that resort atmosphere. So I remember, every GCC there was a story, like when in '85 when we went to South Padre Island, then Grand Regent Wells had a history of having a lot of, I think he actually had a summer home in that area. So he knew the area very well, beautiful white sand beaches, and he wanted the Houston graduate chapter to host, so that was kind of where we decided to go because of that. So there's even stories of how the GCCs actually come to be and how they get to be picked. So obviously Brother Furbush and I have a very close relationship, both being Beta Epsilon alumni and him kind of being right behind me as we kind of went up the Kappa Psi ladder. When I was Grand Vice Regent, he was the Grand Counselor. When I was Grand Regent, he was the Grand Vice Regent. And so it's almost unprecedented to have two people from the same undergraduate chapter kind of like being together on the executive committee. And we really had a chance to share that experience. So that was kind of nice to have, somebody who you kind of grew up with. I actually had, to kind of digress, I actually, when I was working as a hospital pharmacist, Brother Furbush had a rotation with me. And so we would spend half the time on the rotation at the hospital doing Kappa Psi stuff. So we'd be doing 50% work at the hospital, and 50% of our time we'd be doing either stuff for whatever Kappa Psi project we were working on. So it was a fun rotation for him. So I graduated pharmacy school with my bachelor's degree in 1984, and I think he was actually class of '89. So he was kind of out. I was out of pharmacy school when he first started. So, but because I was involved with the chapter and was an advisor, I would always see him. And so when his fifth year rolled around and he needed to do rotation, it was one that he wanted to do with me so we could spend some time together. So, I don't know that anybody can define success. It's different for all of us. We all kind of view it differently, whether it's professionally, whether it's personally. I guess it's really up to the other people, the other brothers, to determine whether or not, was I a successful Grand Regent, versus someone else. But I think it's your own personal satisfaction with your accomplishments. So, was I happy in the things that we accomplished during my tenure on the executive committee as the Grand Regent? And I would say, we did a lot of, like I said, we did a lot of things different when I was Grand Regent. It was always like pushing the envelope and trying to change, because I think I was probably the first one in a different generation, because it was, Dr. Garner and Dr. Wells and Dr. Roberts, who were a little older than me, and even Paul Hiller and Johnny Porter are about 10 years older than me. So I was kind of the first of that new, younger wave with Brian Furbush and Brian Reseter, Dave Maskowitz. I think hopefully the brothers see that my heart has really been all about this fraternity, that I'd like to think I bleed, scarlet red and cadet gray, and that all of the things over the years that I've tried to accomplish have been for the betterment of this wonderful organization, and try to give back hopefully more than what it's given me.